We are the tribe from the north, we're brave and we're bold. Defeating our rivals never gets old. Making our way to the Big Sky Conference. Watch out, 'cause here comes the silver and gold. Whoa, whoa. This is Tubbs at the Club for the Vandals of Idaho.
Welcome back, Tribe from the North, brave and bold, to the official, unofficial podcast of your Idaho Vandals and your Vandal affiliate on the Big Sky Podcast Network. I am your host, Chris Hammond, and with me today I have Brian Marceau. Brian, how are you doing today?
We've got a legend on, man, so I'm doing great.
We do. We indeed do have a legend on today. Not on a special day, nonetheless. It's 2016 on this day, December 22nd. It's the Potato Bowl victory over the Rams, 61-50. That I think a lot of people remember as one of the greats in Vandal history. And with that, we have one of the other greats in Vandal history, one of the best voices of the Vandals, and just the Inland Empire as a whole, Hall of Fame broadcaster, Dennis Patchin. So without that, let's get into it and thank Montucky Cold Snacks for being our sponsor for this episode and all episodes. Ain't nothing like cracking a Montucky Cold Snack, an ultra-refreshing light beer born in majestic Big Sky country. The best part is when you crack a snack, you're giving back. Montucky Cold Snacks donates 8% of profits back to local causes, even right here in Idaho, supporting organizations like the CW Hogs and the Idaho Food Bank. Yeehaw! That's freaking awesome. Montucky Cold Snacks, the light American lager for pow-pow rippers, gator wranglers, pony riders, and badass do-gooders. Visit MontuckyColdSnacks.com today to find out how to get your ass some snacks. And without further ado, we have Dennis Patchin with us. Dennis, how are you doing today?
I'm great, guys. Thanks for having me. You said there was a legend coming on. I'm waiting for him. Who is that? I'd like to know.
We've got John Freeze on next, actually.
Oh, I got a John Freeze story for you. So,
ooh, see, we're leading off. Now we're excited. We're ready to roll. So to start, a lot of people know who you are, but I don't know if everyone's ever heard your story. So can you kind of tell us how you got into journalism?
It was funny because I grew up in a little town in southeast Idaho, American Falls, Idaho. It's a town of about 2,500 people. And I was going to be a teacher and a coach, and I went to Idaho State University to accomplish that goal. And I had a student advisor my first year, and I played around with some videotaping in high school and doing some play-by-play a little bit. And she goes, well, she asked me what did I do in high school, and I told her, and she goes, well, you should try this introduction to broadcasting. I said, okay, it sounds like an easy A. I'm familiar with some of the things they do. So I took the class, had a good time. I took a second class because I had a good time, had a better time. I took a third class, and then I was hooked, and the teaching and coaching went out the business. I did marry a teacher, so I'm still kind of connected. But that's kind of how that worked. Yeah,
we keep teachers around. That's why we have Brian Marceau on our podcast as well. They're good people.
Yes. The guys like me, what I do, I'm just fooling around. They're actually responsible people. My hat's off to those people.
Yeah, from time to time. I will turn it over to our responsible person, Brian.
I guess, yeah, man. Like I said, from time to time. But I mean, hey, that's how we can afford to do something big like this. So, question for you, Dennis. Sports coverage has changed a ton. Not just over the last decade, but since your career started to now. I know I first became familiar with you, KXL Live, Friday Night Sports Extra, back when we didn't have ESPN, local news. That was the sports news. If you didn't read the paper, you had your local news you had your short bit at the end of your local broadcast. That was it.
Yep.
But I'm curious from your end, what's an aspect of, I'm going to relate this specifically to Vandal football right now, Vandal sports in general, but what's an aspect of covering, let's say like Idaho football, that was very different earlier in your career than it is now? But I mean different in a way that like younger fans or like new graduates they won't understand what they're missing out because it just doesn't exist that way anymore.
I think part what you first of all, if you're a fan now, it's way better because there's so much more information that you can get. I mean, look at your show. Look at all the things on the internet. Look where I can go. I can type in Idaho Vandals on a search engine, and I can look for hours on Vandal football or find players. I can find who the Vandals are recruiting, who they're talking to, all those things. That stuff was non-existent. If it didn't happen on your local news in the 3.5 or 4 minutes they had at 11 o'clock or 10 o'clock, wherever you might have been, or in your local newspaper, it wasn't there. So it's way better to be a fan now. What you missed is, and I'm going to include other people, but people like Bob Curtis, when the games weren't on TV, who painted a picture. Or, if you're listening to us in Washington, Bob Robertson or Pete Gross of the Seahawks, or Bob Blackburn of the Sonics, or Bob Rondo with the Huskies, guys that were, before every game was on television, they were out painting a picture and doing those things. We are so dependent on television now. If we can't see the game, it's almost like we don't want to listen to the game anymore, and you're missing out because there truly are some people who can just paint the picture, and you can see the game without being at the game or watching a television. I think that's the thing, is where you have so many. If the game's on, you can stream the game. And, heck, you can do your own play-by-play if you wanted to. You could stream the game and do your own play-by-play. You couldn't do that before. You had to wait for the radio guy, and you couldn't see it, and you just hoped he was good enough so you could that theater of the mind. I think that's the biggest thing that people missing out on is a really great radio broadcaster, because people don't listen to the games on radio as much as they used to.
Yeah, I know.
That's actually real quick. That's actually one of the weird things that is different about Big Sky teams and their their contracts to Pluto TV, which is a lot of them. They pair the radio broadcast with what's going on in the arena.
Well, they do that because they're cheap. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
They do that because it saves money. And I'm going to tell you right now, Pluto sucks. Okay.
Not going to push back on that one.
I'm. You know what? It's unfortunate that the Big Sky thinks that that's actually something good. I watched the Idaho women last night.
Oh my God!
And the broadcast was one camera panning back and forth, never changing the point. I mean, don't tell me your games are on TV. Just tell me we're going to send you a one camera stream, and half the mom and dads who are shooting high school basketball are doing a better job in their local high school gyms than Pluto TV. Pluto TV is an embarrassment, and the Big Sky Conference should be embarrassed that their product is on there.
Yeah, see, so I guess from your experience, we can poke on that a little more. So we were told, is it mostly the universities are at their own will? Because they kind of have told us that, like, it would be the same if they were on ESPN. And I know when we were on ESPN, at Idaho, we didn't play in the Sun Belt. We weren't playing in necessarily places that had, I think, much better broadcast abilities than some of the Big Sky schools. I feel like it is just kind of a Pluto thing, or maybe the conference has a lack of a bare minimum.
I think what they're trying to do is they're trying to partner with somebody who's going to be it's as cheap and it's as easy as possible. When we were in the Sun Belt Conference, everybody seemed to be on ESPN3. Well, ESPN3 was basically a streaming service, and you did a actual production, a multi-camera shoot with a play-by-play guy or a color analyst, a director, a producer, a sideline reporter, and you put the game on, and it would actually look like an actual game. Pluto TV looks like you hired a 16-year-old kid with his iPhone, and he just moves it back and forth and never changes it. I mean, it's great because you can see all 22 guys on the field, but after about 5 minutes, you don't want to watch it anymore because you can't really tell anything. So it's, the Big Sky can say, yeah, all our games are on a streaming service or online, but it's, just because they're on doesn't mean they're watchable. And Pluto TV, because of all the glitches and all the other problems, is flat unwatchable.
And I'll tell you too, the basketball for Idaho right now at Mem Gym with the 18,000 lines and the one camera, like you talked about, it is if you don't already know who everyone is, it's virtually impossible to figure out who the individual players are.
Yeah, I completely agree with that.
Yeah.
If I was using Pluto, I wouldn't watch it. I would just turn the volume up because then you'd listen to the radio. Because whoever's doing the game on Pluto is doing it for radio, so he's going to do a radio broadcast on TV, which is it's a different broadcast, but that's I can't imagine being Chris King or Larry Weir at Eastern or some of the other guys in the conference calling basketball games off of Pluto TV because they can't travel or they can't be in the building. I can't even fathom how they're going to do that.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. We didn't even think about that. But I guess to kind of bring it back Vandal centric here, what are some of your favorite moments while covering the Vandals?
Ooh, I'll be honest with you. Anytime I got a close game, people are listening. It's the blowouts, it's the hard games. I mean, you can look at going to Penn State, and you can look at going to Auburn. Actually, when they a few years ago going to Auburn, the Vandals played really well for about 2.5 quarters, and then seemed to run out of steam. Penn State wasn't that case, but those are cool places to go. And to me as a broadcaster, that's like, I've been there, I've done a game there. That's really interesting. To me, it's the close games. It was, having done it the last five years, it was the overtime win at UNLV, which was remarkable. It was the Troy game, where the team left Spokane on a flight at 2:00 a.m. Saturday morning, got to Montgomery, Alabama at 9:00, had an hour bus ride to Troy, Alabama, for a 1:00 kickoff, and won that football game when they missed the last second field goal. Those are the games. The Halloween game, even though it was a loss,
Ankleception.
Mexico State, was truly one of the craziest games I've ever seen. Just by the amount of scoring, the bowl game, the win over Colorado State. Who scores 50 points in a bowl game and isn't within double digits? I mean, those are the games that are exciting, the games that are close, the games that are meaningful. Those are the games that I have a good time with. I'm also an offensive guy. I'm old enough to have grown up on the AFL, and I'm not talking about the Arena Football League. I'm talking about the American Football League, where the scores were in the 40s. That's the football I grew up on. So I like scoring. I don't like 10-7 games. I don't like 13-6 games. Give me something 35, 32, 42, 38, those kind of games. That's what I like. So
that's a touchdown, Idaho.
Those are probably some of the games that stick out in my mind. But there are other games that stick out for, reasons. The NAU game at the end of last year, which will now wind up being the last Idaho game I called, and Mason Petrino had a sensational game. And, say what you want to about Mason, who was picked on by a lot of people. He had a pretty good year last year, and he ended it on a high note. So there are individual games that I remember for individuals, but there are games that I remember, for those kind of things. So,
yeah.
And conversely, because we're Vandals, we have a ton of these. Do you have any all-time gut punch games you've called?
Well, the New Mexico State game on Halloween, where there was like 8 people in the crowd because they decided to hold it Halloween night, and the guy comes up with the interception where he grabbed it off his ankle. That's hard. Those are hard games to lose. Those are hard games to travel home from. That's a gut punch game. That's probably the one that's I tend to remember good games. I remember that, the last game in the Sun Belt at Georgia State, and Colton Richardson coming off the bench and really playing well in that game and winning that game. I remember the Eastern game in the Kibbe Dome, where that's as good a half from an Idaho Vandal football team I've seen, be it John L. Smith's, Dennis Erickson's, Keith Gilbertson's, Chris Tormey's. That first half against Eastern was absolutely sensational. So I remember those kind of things. I try to remember the games that are more positive than they are negative. I try to flush the negative games as fast as I can.
Yeah. That New Mexico State game, though. I mean, we were up, 28-0 at halftime or something ridiculous, too?
I think it was a 28 point lead late in the third quarter. And Idaho was running out of guys, and that was part of the problem. They ran out of defensive backs. They had 4 left on the field. They couldn't go to a nickel or dime package, and New Mexico State just shredded them.
Yeah. That game still to me stands out as one of my, because I was like waiting to go to Halloween. You mentioned like it's on Halloween, so I'm waiting to go meet up with people for Halloween. I'm like, well, I'm gonna see this one through. Like we're gonna win, and then everything just fell apart.
Yeah, that trip home was awful. I'm just gonna tell you, because you got to drive from Las Cruces to El Paso and then fly home. That was a bad trip home. I'll just tell you that right now.
I think every single person we've had on this show that has experienced New Mexico State has literally described it about that way, as like it's just not fun.
Well, the Sun Belt was a league of you fly somewhere and you drive an hour. It really was. It was awful travel. I mean, there was a year in the winter of the Sun Belt we went to Alabama 3 times because it played Auburn in a non-conference game. Then we played at Troy, and then we played at South Alabama. It's like, come on, conference, figure that out. You don't have to send somebody 3 times to Alabama. New Mexico State didn't go once.
Yeah. God, Sun Belt was just. I think we've been in it twice. That's the crazy part. I mean, it was the first time Utah State and everything, but crazy. Yeah. So I guess this is a good point. We've covered a lot, but having covered Idaho football and for all intents and purposes, a lot of Idaho sports for decades now, you're essentially like a Vandal historian. What would you say is the current story of the football team?
That's a good question. I think there were some good things that they did last year, and I think that there are some positives that they can build on. I really think the front 7 on the defensive side, and I don't know if we're going to have a season or not, but I think that the defense on the front 7 is as good as the front 7 that has been at Idaho in a long, long time. We may have to go back to the Ryan Phillips, Jeff Robinson, Brian Stranley days for a front. And I don't know if the linebackers were as good then as they are now with Christian Ellison and Trey Walker. That's a solid front 7. There's some question marks in the secondary just because of lack of experience, some new guys back there. So that's what they're going to have to do. They're going to miss Jeff Cotton a lot. He's a guy that probably was better than Idaho, better than the Big Sky, and for whatever reason wound up at Idaho. And even a better reason for Vandal fans, he redshirted that year. So we got a 5th year out of him, a 5th-year senior, and we saw what he did in that game, in those games last year. What Idaho has not been able to do for a while, with the exception of a year here or there, is be good on both sides of the football at the same time. Either they're really good on defense or they're really good on offense, and that's been the case. And that Paul's had those issues. Rob Akey had those issues, and you saw when they were good on both sides of the football what happened. A couple of years ago, you go to the Humanitarian or the Idaho Bowl and you win. You beat Colorado State. That was a good team on both sides of the ball. Akey's team in 2009, that was a good team on both sides of the football. Defense was a little suspect, but the offense was really good. That's what when Idaho's good on both sides of the football, they don't have to be great. They got to be good on both sides of the football. They're going to be above 500. We've seen that in the past. Chris Tormey had a couple of those teams. Tom Cable did not have any of those teams that were good on both sides of the football. Nick Holt did not have any of those that were good on both sides of the football. So I think if you can be balanced, I think you're going to win some games. And certainly you got to be able to slow the pass down in the conference. If you can't stop people from passing the football in the Big Sky Conference, you're going to be a 500 team at best. It doesn't work. There's so much talent in throwing the football in this league that you don't have to stop people. You just got to slow them down. And Idaho's had issues with that. I think they're going to be able to do that this year if we get a season. If we don't get a season, then certainly in the fall of 2021. I think this defense has a chance to be special.
Yeah, you kind of touched on Jeff Cotton, and you had one of my favorite during the return series when we came back. You had an interview with Cottrell Haywood, and I think he promised to give you was it fashion advice or something like that? You end up getting that.
Yeah, probably. The kids. I call them kids because they're so much younger than I am on the team. Really never got to see me because I'm a Hawaiian shirt, Levi's, tennis shoes or boat shoes kind of guy. Coat and tie is not me dressing up. And when you go on the charters, you got to dress up. You got to wear business attire. So sometimes you wear a suit coat. I would never wear a tie for football, but I would be dressed up. So yeah, my fashion is not great. I have no problem with people make fun of how I dress. I really, because I honestly, I don't care, and it's comfortable for me. So if you want to make fun of me, yeah.
I just remember
there's some guys that can dress on that football team over the years the 5 years that I can do it. I will tell you that. So
who's the best dresser, you think?
Boy, let me think. Cottrell was pretty good. Let me think about that. Let's go on to the next question. Let me see if I can somebody pop back into my head. So I think that let me think about it's none of the offensive linemen. Okay, none of those guys. Okay.
Tell me Mike Marbrough's not a great dresser.
No, Mike might be me. Okay, I might be a better guy than him. No, none of those guys. None of those guys. None of the defensive linemen. No, you're just not. That's the way I'm built. No, you're not going to look good. It's got to be a receiver. It's got to be a DB. It's got to be one of those guys that's fast, just standing still. They just look fast. Yeah. Lloyd Hightower was pretty good. Lloyd was a really good guy. Elijah Penny, for a big guy, could dress it up every now and then. He was pretty good. So those are some of the guys.
You touched on this topic a couple of times now. It has to do with with the theoretical spring season, and Eastern Washington today they released their 2021 fall schedule. And of course, the potential seasons, that news is going to continue to evolve as it has been since, last fall. But there was talk, I know, of if we're going to have a spring season, the fall season might be potentially pushed back a little bit. I know the Big Ten initially had some schedules looking like that. But I know Eastern Washington, their fall 2021 schedule, week by week, looks pretty dang identical to an average schedule. As in, like, first game, UNLV September 2nd. Their first Big Sky Conference game would be Portland State, September 25th. End of the season, November 20th, which to me that looks not that different from any Big Sky schedule we've seen over the last few years. Have you heard anything specific from anyone? I mean, about the feasibility of actually doing the spring season? I know, Colton Nuanez out of Montana, he is on the record saying he doesn't think they're actually going to do it. Just they're waiting for the first team to say we're done.
Right. Here's what I think. I think we're gonna wait until we start practice in February 1st. We're gonna see what the numbers are. We're also gonna see who's been vaccinated and where we are with the vaccine. I think that they want to play. I don't know if we're gonna play. I think they'll try to start it. But what we saw in the Pac-12 is if you miss one game, you're gonna miss 2 games. Now the Big Sky has built in bye weeks in week 4 and week 8. So you play 3 weeks, you take a week off. You play 3 weeks, you take a week off. They built those in where everybody has those where you can reschedule games because they're trying to get teams to have the number of games they need to get into the FCS playoffs. There's 5 leagues that have already opted out of FCS. I think have already opted out of the spring league. So I don't know. I think they're going to try, or at least they're going to wait until we see what the numbers are in another 2 months. I don't know how far they're willing to push it back into the spring. Are they willing to, instead of starting the end of February, they're willing to start the end of March? If they are, that might be more feasible. But the other concern is we're going to get to a point where you're going to have to stop playing because you're going to turn around and play in the fall, and you're going to play a full game and a full 11-game season. I truly believe we're going to play in the fall. There's no doubt in my mind we're going to play in the fall. You can play 6 weeks in the spring because it's a little bit longer than spring football. But, and then you start looking at how close, where are we? So I think they're going to try. And what we do is we may get a start. We may get 2 weeks in. We may get a week in. We may get 3 weeks in before they say, no, there's just no teams. Not anybody's able to play. And the NCAA just pulls the plug on it. I mean, the fact that everybody gets a free year I think is a positive. And if somebody has to, you get 3 games in, it might be a situation where, that's your spring football. That's better than 15 practices, and you prepare for 3 weeks. I don't know. I think they're going to try. I don't know what they're going to do.
So I guess if you could I'm kind of curious, what are some of your favorite stories from the football coaches? Like, are there any? Because I heard Akey, we've had him on, funny dude. Petrino's a guy people don't really get a lot of insight into.
Yeah, Rob is one of my in top 5 all-time coaches ever to deal with. Very easy to deal with. Very just carrying on a conversation, and he's no questions out of bounds. He's really good. I really like Rob Akey. Dennis Erickson, I'll go back to when I started covering Idaho Vandals. My first Big Sky football game was in 1974. Actually 73, the fall of 73, when I was a sophomore in high school. I went and saw Idaho State play Nevada Reno in then what was the Mini Dome, now Holt Arena. And so I've been around the league for that long. I started covering Idaho. My first sports job was in radio in Pocatello after my sophomore year in college in 1970, this fall of 78. So I've been around the league for a long time, and I've seen Idaho. Interviewed Dennis Erickson. First time I talked to him was 1982 when he took the job at the University of Idaho. I like Dennis a lot. Dennis is a really good coach. Dennis is a really smart coaching mind. He's not a great interview, but he gives you what, from my perspective, he gives you what you need. Keith Gilbertson was a crack up. Keith was always freaked out on Boise State week. Okay, and that was the last regular season game. And you could go down in the Kibbie Dome and you could shoot practice, and then you wait and do your interviews when you're covering the team. There was no internet, so you couldn't put plays up. Nobody could sneak in, and those kind of things. So it was old time sports reporting, but it was fun. So one day we're down there for Boise State week, and you can't shoot anything Boise State week. You can't take your camera out. All you can get is interviews. So we had parked our camera over on the corner against the wall. And Keith walks over, as he always does, and he goes, "That camera's not on." And now, it's pointed away from the field. We are standing maybe 8 feet away from it. Okay? Even if it's turned on, you're not getting it through. He was so freaked out. So we were talking, and there was a new guy from Creme TV, who was another TV station in Spokane. He didn't know who the guy was. Brand new, had just started. And he goes, "Who's that up there?" Because they were upstairs doing something. They had a camera, and he didn't know the rules. We go, "Oh, that's the new reporter from Boise." He lost it. He had that guy thrown out. He called security. And so we didn't say anything. So we found out Keith got in trouble from the university. Not trouble. Not they. Hey, don't do that anymore. And so we go down. And he's waiting for us. He is waiting for us. And he's just, you guys funny. Oh, you got me into trouble. It was a great Keith Gilbertson story. John L. Smith was great. I love John L. John L. was fun to work with. He was great. Chris Tormey was kind of Chris Tormey changed things. Practices were open. You could shoot anything you wanted. Chris Tormey came in, and it was difficult. It was hard. Joel Thomas was getting a 6th year back. I called and said, "We're coming down. We need some video of Joel in practice. That's all we need. We don't need him doing 11 on 11, 7 on 7. I just need him running through the tires, sprinting, whatever. We need like 12 shots. That's all we need." I couldn't get him. Couldn't get him. And so for about a year and a half, we didn't send anybody down to Idaho to do anything. Because it was just, you couldn't do anything. All you could do was interviews, and you could get those from the university. So Chris could be a little bit hard to deal with. He's a good friend of mine now. I like him, but he had grown up in that Don James school of paranoia where everybody was out to get you, and so I'm just going to close everything down. Nick Holt was Nick Holt. Nick is a high-strung guy, and We had our issues. I don't want to say our issues, but Nick is probably the coach that may have trusted me more than anybody else. When he's leaving the University of Idaho, we went down. I had known his wife longer than Nick because she was a basketball coach at Gonzaga before she went to Idaho. They got married, and Julie, and she's great. She's fabulous. So we find out that he's leaving Idaho to go to work for the Detroit Lions because Scott Linehan is the head coach, and he's hired Nick to be the defensive line coach in Detroit. So we drive down there, and we get in the car and drive down, and he's not taking our calls. And no. So I called his wife, and I said, "Where's Nick?" And she goes, "He's at the house." And I said, "Well, we're coming down. We want to talk to him." I said, so she goes, "I'll call him, and I'll tell him to talk to you." So she called him, and she said, "Yeah, he'll talk to you guys." So we drove to his house. We did the interview. Great. Start taking the camera down, and he goes, "Well, I don't know if I'm going." I go, "What?" I said, "You've already resigned." "Yeah, Pete Carroll's called me and wants to go to USC to be the defensive line or defensive coordinator. I think it was at USC." He goes, "And I don't know what I'm going to do yet." And I said, "Well, if you trust me, then let me ask you some questions like, it's the USC. So we redid the interview whether he got the USC job." So we had 2 interviews. We had one if he was going to the Lions. We had one if he was going to USC, and we didn't use them, but he trusted us to only use the one that was the appropriate one, and we did, and we were the only ones who had that stuff. So Nick, I owe that to Nick. Nick has been great. I just actually texted him the other day. He's really good. Rob was good. Paul is interesting. Paul is all football. There's 2 things about Paul Petrino. It's football and his family, and there isn't anything else. Okay, and once you understand that, he's really easy to work with. He's a football coach, and if you knew his dad is the same way. Very intense. This is football, but family's important too. And it's an interesting thing. I got along with Paul fabulous. He was great. The coaches shows were great. It was really good. But I can see if you're not willing to understand where he comes from, how he can rub some people the wrong way. I think he gets a bad rap sometimes. So, I've always said this is the key to my success in getting along with coaches. I've always said, I don't care how the coach likes me or not, as long as his wife likes me. Okay, as long as the wife likes the broadcaster. If the coach goes home and complains about the broadcaster, the wife will say, "No. You don't understand. He's a really good guy. He's got your back. He's fine. He's those things." So I always tried to make sure the wife likes you. Because if the coach likes you and the wife hates you, you're in big trouble. You got no shot. So that's the key to any young broadcaster. Make sure the head coach's wife likes who you are.
It's funny you said that because when you're talking about Paul, that's exactly how I remember my first encounter with him being when we went to the 19 media days, and when we actually got to sit down and talk to him. That was my first experience with him, and I was just amazed by how like you just start sitting down and you talk X and O's in football, and like. And there's something that he lights up, and that's what I was kind of saying. Like, I feel like when you hear people talk about him, you don't always hear that, like, he's actually not – he gets a weird stigma for being difficult, but I really enjoyed my time I got, man. Like, he's very football smart.
He's one of my favorite people to sit down and just talk X's and O's with. I learned so much about the game from him. It's funny. We had a guy – and normally a coach will talk football and will dabble in other things. There's a time in the Palouse where he had a guy at Washington State who didn't want to talk any football. In Mike Leach, he did not want to talk football with you at all. He would talk anything else. Paul, on the other hand, wanted to talk nothing but football. And so as long as you know how to deal with coaches and what they're excited in, and then you kind of can twist it and drive it your way. I think that's good. Paul is so much fun to sit down and talk X's and O's with, because you learn something. You learn something every day. He's a really smart football mind. He's a really smart football mind.
Yep.
You know, Dennis, you just kind of covered, honestly, all the coaches from Idaho I could come up with off the top of my head, which is going to have me circle back to Dennis Patchin, Vandal historian, for a second. I want to hear and actually, no, it's not historian. We're going to give you the Tubbs of the Club honorary title, University of Idaho Athletics Supreme Court Justice Patchin. We want to hear and this is the official adjudication. Other people can have takes. That doesn't matter. This is official.
Okay.
We want to hear I want you to weigh in from the bench on the two most consequential moves Idaho's football team has made over the past 30 years. And those two moves are moving up to FBS in 1996 and moving back down to FCS in 2018.
Okay. I am of the belief that when Idaho moved up, I thought it was okay, but my question is where are you trying to get to? And I didn't think Idaho had a clear mind exactly where they were going and what the goal was. Were you just going because Boise State was going? If that's the case, then that's the wrong answer. I think Boise State, Vandal fans are going to hate me for this. I think Boise State had a plan. I'm not sure Idaho Athletics had a plan. I think Idaho was a reactionary move. I think Boise State was a move that was like, we're going. The problem for the University of Idaho is as Boise State, and I'm as big a Boise State hater as there is. Okay, just so we get that on. But the way that the state capitol, the way that businesses, the way that there was an excitement in Boise, and there was also a financial situation. You had corporations. I mean, the Boise State alumni base wasn't raising the money, but you had places you could go to get the money. And once they turned the football program around and really started winning, then everybody wanted to be part of it. You can see that anywhere where if you've got a successful program, people want to be part of it. Idaho didn't have the corporate sponsorship behind it. They had the booster sponsorship. They had a lot of alumni in very powerful positions in the state and still do. But there isn't the corporation base in Moscow that there is in Boise. So the first thing is where are you going and what's your end goal? What are you trying to accomplish? You're not going to be able to get to the Pac-12, okay? So are you okay playing at the next level where you're not playing for a national championship? That was my concern. I'm a big proponent of FCS football because you're playing for something. I think teams in the Sun Belt and the MAC and those leagues, what are you playing for? As good as Boise State has been, what are they playing for? As good as BYU has been, do they get to play for a national championship? No. So you're playing to win a conference championship and go to a bowl game? What's that mean? So I think moving up was a mistake. There was some success, but there wasn't a lot. I was okay with moving back, and I'll tell you why, is because where was Idaho going to play? I mean, the Sun Belt had basically said, you're out. Okay, we don't want you in here anymore. You're done. Your 4-year run is done. You're out of the conference. Where are you going to play? Going into the Sun Belt, if you remember, Idaho did play a year as an independent. I think there was 4 money games, and it was a disastrous season. And you paid the bills, you paid the bills, but it was not a good thing. And it's just, kids want to play in winning programs, and if there's no conference championship to play for, that's what are you playing for? So being able to play for a conference championship that actually means something, I think is good. I was okay with them staying, but not as an independent. And as long as they didn't have a league to play in, and if you talk to the people in New Mexico State, that's a nightmare right now. That's an absolute nightmare. They got no league. Doesn't look like they're going to get into a league. Nobody wants them in their league, and they're just hanging out there, and they're not going to get to go anywhere. They're not going to get to a bowl game at the end of the year. So I am also one of those guys that, if you're playing for a championship, that means something. If you're playing to go to a third-tier bowl game, is that really what you want to do? I mean, everybody in high school plays for a state championship. Everybody, in professional football plays for a championship. You want to play for a championship. FCS plays for a championship. You can go to Idaho and win a national championship. You can't go to Boise State and win a national championship. You're never going to get a chance as long as it's just 4 teams. So I was okay with them moving back down because there wasn't a place to go. And I think that's one thing that people didn't just sit down and look. Okay, the Sun Belt doesn't want us. It's not like Idaho said we're out of the Sun Belt. The Sun Belt says pack your bags and get out. So they would have had to been an independent, and they'd still be an independent. Okay, because New Mexico State is going to get a conference before Idaho does if Idaho stayed at the FBS level, just because it's so hard to get to because the teams are so far away. I mean, there was talk that the Dakotas were going to go, and Montana and Montana State was going to go, and if North Dakota State went to South Dakota State, and they'd all jump up to the FBS level and play. But once again, those schools looked at it and said, we're not playing for anything. We're going to play to go to a bowl game 3 days before or after Christmas. We'd rather play for a national championship. And I think that the fact that Idaho's back into that conversation, I think it's okay. The problem is Idaho's never going to get to where Boise State is right now. So you can only chase that dog for so long before you run into a fire hydrant, and you're just not going to be able to get to where they are. I mean, look what happened today. Brian Harsin supposedly took the Auburn job, because he basically said we need to get out of the Mountain West, and he looked around and said we're not getting out of the Mountain West, so I'm getting out of the Mountain West and I'm going to the SEC. Boise has the same problem right now that Idaho had in the Sun Belt. There's no place to go. There's no place to go for Boise State. As much as they've had success in football, they're not that attractive, at least to where they want to go.
Yeah, it's funny. That's what we were talking about before the show, is like, what does this mean for Boise State? Possibly Olympic, because I know there's talks about the AAC, so maybe their Olympic sports end up in the sky, but then would they do the perspective of being on the same level with Idaho and Idaho State, even though the Big Sky makes total sense for their Olympic sports? But I'm going
to tell you right now, if I'm the Big Sky Conference, no.
I agree.
You're not playing football, you're out. If I was the commissioner of the conference, I would go to Pauley and I would go to Davis, and I would go, are you all in? Because if you're not, you're out. You go find someplace else to play football. We'll play it 3 or 4 times on a non-conference schedule, but you're out. The Eastern schedule came out. Eastern Washington and the University of Montana are 215 miles away, and they're not playing in 2021. Why? Because we have to protect Pauley and Davis. Okay? Shut up. Okay? This is a game that's cheap to play. This is a game that the fan bases want to see played. This would be like Idaho and Eastern not playing. And that happened. That had happened on the schedule. This is like Idaho not playing Montana. That could happen on the schedule. It doesn't make any sense. It's like Idaho State and Weber not playing. It's insanity on those situations. So come on, Big Sky Conference. Let's do what's best for the conference. Let's not do what's best for the teams that are only here for football. If you're Davis and if you're Pauley and you're only in for football, are you really all in? Are you really worried about the conference, or are you just worried about where you're going to play football? Because if that's the case, then you get the leftovers, and we're going to make sure that the teams that are playing everything get the games that their fan bases and they need.
Yeah, it's funny. I feel like this leads in perfectly to my next question. I feel like you need to find a way to get "Are You Kidding Me" back as a segment. That's what I felt like I was listening to. So that was kind of my next question. Do you have a favorite kind of Vandal? Are you kidding me?
Ooh. Gosh, no. But it's kind of it's not an "Are you kidding me?" but it's kind of a just kind of peels the curtain back on Bob Curtis a little bit. My first experience to Bob, I think I was 15. I found him on the radio doing an Idaho Vandal game. The reason I found him is there was a guy who his mom was the librarian at our high school. He was a senior when I was an 8th grader, and played at the University of Idaho. And so I was listening to the game on the radio, and Bob in the 70s, Bob was really good. I mean, he was really, really, really good. He was as good as there was in college football. That's the reason he's in, he's won the Schenkel Award. He's in the College Football Hall of Fame. He was really good. So I'd listen in, and he just sounded like it was fun to be there. It was fun to be at the Dome. It was fun to be there. Fast forward to my broadcasting career, and that always stuck in my head. So I got to know Bob when I came to Spokane, and I was on the air doing TV, and I got to know him, and we did a couple stories with him. And I think when he hit 500 games, right? We did a bunch of stories, and I would always tell him, the first time I introduced him to me, I would say, I'm so happy to meet you. I used to listen to you in high school. You're one of the guys is the reason I'm in the business. And he'd look at me and he goes, if I had a nickel for every guy who said that, I've had a bunch of nickels. And laugh, ha, ha, ha. So it was like, I wasn't sure how to take that. Was that a compliment or was that not a compliment? So every time I would see Bob, I would say, hey, Bob. And the older I got, probably the worse it got. And I would always say, hey, remember I used to listen to you in high school. And it would kind of just build up and build up and build up. One time Bob just snapped at me. And he goes, blankety blank you, Patchin. Yeah, I go, well, wait, I thought that was a compliment. I used to listen to you in high school. This is about the time I'm like 50. This is a couple of years before he died. And he goes, do you know how old that makes me? So it's kind of an "Are you kidding me?" moment, because sometimes you peel the curtain back a little bit and the person isn't what you think it was. Bob was so fun to be around. He was so great to be around. He's just a great broadcaster, just a fun guy to be around. But he could be a little salty every now and then if he needed to be.
So this might be a different way of asking the Vandal "Are you kidding me?" moments. But Dennis, let's say we make you athletic director at Idaho for a day. What are some of the moves you think just need to happen at our school?
Well, I tell you what, the first thing is already happening. That's the building of the new basketball facility. That gets you out of the Kibbe Dome for basketball. That gets you out of Memorial Gym while you're waiting for football to end, and it gives them your own facility, and it gives you a place to recruit. I would think that in talking to the guys that had been there before, now, Don Munson didn't have this problem because he was winning games, and the Kibbe Dome was actually full. And I'm not talking about the Cowan Spectrum. I'm talking about there were 12,000 people in watching that basketball team that made it to the Sweet 16. But the other guys have said, it's hard to recruit here. It's hard when you bring a recruit in for a basketball game, and the atmosphere isn't very good. The new building is going to be great. That is checked off the books. Project started by Rob Spear, finished by Terry Golick. Hats off to them. The university president, great job. The other probably, and I know that Terry's been working on this, is try and get back, the boosters, and you might be able to get some, you might not be able to get all, is the people that basically stopped donating or stopped giving when the team dropped from the FBS back to the FCS. And I know that's not an easy situation, but to me, that would be goal number one. And then probably, and these are all things that are being done. The other thing would be is trying to figure out how to energize the fan base, but also try and figure out a way to get a little more media coverage from Spokane. I know Gonzaga's changed everything, and Eastern football has changed everything. But when I got to Spokane in 1984, the Vandals were the number 2 team in your coverage list. Washington State was first, Idaho was second. I don't think you can ever displace Gonzaga, so you got to figure out where you can get your niche in there. And certainly, certainly get the coverage back into the Boise Valley, because those 3 TV stations in Boise have just become all Broncos all the time. And if that means hiring a staff of video, like a reporter who shoots practice, does interviews, and basically hands stories to stations, I think you can get them back on the news. You can get them back up. I think that's a really important thing that Idaho's not doing is a video arm. And I think that would more than pay for itself if you were to be able to do that. That would be those would be the things I do. But 2 of those are already underway. I know for sure.
Yeah, and winning makes the other 2 even easier.
Sure.
If you start winning, the stations will cover you, and boosters will come back. For how much they say they'll never be back. If we're in a deep playoff run, they'll be back.
Right. You get into the playoffs at all. Forget about it, the first playoff run. You get into the playoffs at all, and you start starting an upward climb. Yeah, they're going to come back. They will come back.
Yeah. So we're kind of coming up on time, so I guess now would be a good time to kind of ask you that John Freeze story you kind of teased us with at the beginning of the episode.
So I've known John since he was in high school at Coeur d'Alene High. I covered him starting his sophomore year in high school when he took over as the starter there at Coeur d'Alene. And John is one of the 5 nicest people that I have ever covered as an athlete. He couldn't be nicer. His mom and dad are great. His family is great. He couldn't be nicer. He's about ready to become a grandpa. I don't know if you guys knew that or not.
Did not.
Yeah, his one of his sons and his wife are about ready to have a baby here any day now. So good luck to John being a grandpa. I can't wait to see him after he becomes that, because I'm going to tease him like there's no tomorrow. But I covered for 3 years at Coeur d'Alene. I cover him at the University of Idaho. He wins the Peyton Award and is about ready to get drafted. And day before the draft, I mean, there was talk that he was going to go late first round or early second round, is where he had been tapped. So I go to his house the Friday before the draft. I think the draft was Saturday, Sunday at that time, and do a story with him. And I go in, and his basement is all decorated, and it's ready for a party. And we do a quick interview and we run the story. Okay. And that's when I think the draft was 5 rounds, and then the second day was the rest of it. He's not picked in the first round. He's not picked in the second round. He's not picked in the third round. He's not picked in the fourth round. He's not picked. And it's like the whole first day goes, he's not picked. Well, I'm a TV guy. I'm a reporter. I got to call him back. I called John and I said, John, you can tell me no if you want, and I will completely understand. He answered the phone, which I would have never answered the phone. I mean, that shows how good guy he is. And I said, I'd like to come back to you and ask you about tomorrow and that whole thing. And he paused for a minute. He goes, yeah, come on. And I was like, I was really hoping that he would say no. No, sorry. And I would have been fine with that. I would have said, okay, John, I had to call, and I wouldn't have said anything to anybody about it. I would just, he didn't get drafted. Hopefully he gets drafted tomorrow and move on to the next story. So I went back out there and I went, and the downstairs went back into the downstairs. The downstairs, it had the feeling not of a party. It had almost the feeling of a funeral. And it wasn't. Maybe it was my feeling. It wasn't the feeling I got from anybody there, because nobody was there either time. It just was. It was weird because it was just, what he thought was going to happen didn't happen, and it's multiplied. It's the Aaron Rodgers thing times 100. It just didn't play out on national TV, but it played out in a young man's room. Now he gets picked like one of the first picks of the next day, and I go back out there and we interview and everything. It's party again. It's great, but I have so much respect for John after doing that interview and how he handled himself, when it just, most people would have never answered the phone, there's no chance they would have talked to anybody. And I felt really bad, but that's my job, and he could say no. But yeah, he earned a million miles of respect from me for just sitting down and doing that. I think that's why he's been successful with pretty much whatever he's done. That's who he is. That's who he was raised as his parents, and that's who he's become. So.
With
Brian.
that, we're closing in on our final segment, where it's time for us to get iced. And just so you're clear, every time a first time guest comes on, they get to ask me and Chris a question. It can be sports related, it can be Vandal related, it can really cover anything. We want to give you a few seconds to make sure you have your getting asked question in mind, and we'll jump right back into your question after we hit the ad read.
I already know what it is. I already knew what it was when you told me at the beginning of the show I get to ask this question. So if you guys are ready, I'm asking this question right now.
We're going to put our listeners in suspense while we run through our quick ad read, then we'll throw it right back to you.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. We're back into weekly or almost weekly episodes on Tubs of the Club. And with our favorite season, football season, just a couple months away, that's 67 days as of our recording. If you like what we're doing, consider giving Tubs of the Club a rating on iTunes or Spotify. Share our posts on social media, or if you can, consider chipping in to helping us keep the lights on by becoming a patron to Tubs of the Club by signing up at patreon.com/Tubs of the Club. We have a good thing going that's only going to get better as our football team looks to take another step. Our men's basketball team somehow turns around, and our women's basketball team just keeps doing what they're already doing. And listener support is what helps us cover operating costs, while Chris, Martin, Alex, and I do our best to give you the Vandal coverage you need. So sign up to our Patreon or make a one-time gift at paypal.me/Tubs at the club. Quick thank you to our Tub card members, Dallas Hammer and Mathew Janicek, Tub token member, Nick Stutzman, and premium drink token members, Nick Weber, Dave Ellison, Taylor Cash, and Daryn Cozak. And with that, Dennis, we're ready to get iced.
All right. So my question then for you guys is, did it take me actually leaving as the voice of the Idaho Vandals before you actually asked me on the show? So I don't get why it took so long here. Was it because I quit? It's like, let's throw the old guy a bone. He's walking out the door. Let's get him on. What I need an answer here. Don't give me this media BS answer. Give me the answer. How come Patchin wasn't on the show before?
Yeah, well, we pride ourselves. Well, I don't know if we pride ourselves, but none of us are media except the guy who started it. So I'm happy to. Yeah, it was 100%. We were throwing you a bone. I mean, God, you're not covering the Vandals anymore. We figured you'd just be dying to be like, wow, I just gotta. I'm already scratching the itch. I gotta talk some Vandals, and how am I gonna do that anymore? So we're like, all right, I guess it's time we throw the old voice of the Vandals on the podcast. But no, I mean, honestly, probably should have. I think we're still figuring out how this stuff works.
Were you afraid I would say no?
I don't think it was that, because we met you at media days, and I was going to laugh when you're telling your story. Yeah, Brian hit you with the same line you hit with Bob Curtis. He was like, I grew up listening to you, and you actually hit us with the, oh, that makes me feel old.
No, see, you know what? I got told very early on in my career that people invite you into their house. They feel like you're part of the family. So I would never do that. I would say thank you very much. We covered multiple generations on our high school football show. I mean, I've been in Spokane. This will be coming up on 37 years here. So I would have never done that. I always am very nice to people who come up to me. So yeah, I'm just disappointed in this. I had to wait this long.
Dude, what I'd add to that is, first off, when I came on the show was a year. I was drafted after I sent Chris like 1,600 direct Twitter messages during football games, and I'm pretty sure he's like, Jesus Christ, I'm just gonna have him on the show. I don't want to read this shit anyway. Okay, Brian, come on. But I wasn't on initially, and I know there's a handful of podcasts kind of like what we have. Montana Mint is one, Eagle Power Hour is another, where we actually didn't do that many interviews during the regular seasons. And it wasn't until COVID came on that, just because we want to stay on the air, and if there's nothing going on, what we do is we invite people on. So like for us, the last few months, we've had more interviews in the last 3 months than we had in the first probably 2.5 years combined.
Yeah, I think we had like Marcel Posey.
I think
that was it. Maybe Rico.
Was Wasn't Ryan Phillips on your show a while back?
No, we haven't had Ryan Phillips on either. We had Eric Heisaw on.
Okay, you need. Well, one of my favorite Idaho Vandals, guy who I thought if he played strong safety would have played in the National Football League.
Yeah, well, now we're more used to this thing. We should probably get him on now that he's, really our only. Well, I guess Chris King's a good guy too, so maybe we'll have more Voices of the Vandal on. But I don't think this will be the last time we have you on either. I think you're a.
Well, if this is the last time, and then I'm really going to be mad at you guys. And I will tell you, Chris might be too nice a guy. I'm going to tell you that he's about as nice a guy as you're ever going to meet. He even me and him just talking, he doesn't say bad things about anybody. So
it's a Chris thing.
He's a really nice guy, and I'm really happy he's got the job. He works hard. He's going to be really good. He's going to be really good. I hope he's not as good as I am, but he might be better.
You set a bar really high. We'll see, but we agree. It's we have Eastern and Montana fans that when we play basketball, they would message us, "Who is this guy? He is so good to listen to." So we've heard it. So yeah, real quick before we let you go here. So obviously, no longer the Voice of the Vandals. What are you up to now? And if the people want to get a hold of you, how can they?
I'm on Twitter, and my Twitter is really simple. It's DPSWX. I'm the new sports director at SWX and KHQ television. And part of me taking this job was my old job. I had the ability to be able to do Vandal football games. This one will not allow me to do it. The one thing that if the people live in the Spokane area who get SWX on cable or in northern Idaho, or I think it's in Lewiston and some other places, even in Montana a little bit, and Tri-Cities, is I will be doing some Idaho football and basketball games for SWX on TV. So you'll still be able to hear me, you'll still be able to see me. It just didn't mesh, and this was a full-time job, and unfortunately the Voice of the Vandals is not a full-time job. It worked in my old full-time job. It didn't work in with my new full-time job. And, I have to thank Tom Morris and Rob Spear. Those are the two guys that really pushed for me to do the games. And I had a lot of fun in the 5 years. Ryan Phillips, I think, is as good an analyst as there is. I really like him. He really works hard. I'm going to miss doing the games, but, economic things kind of dictate sometimes what you can and can't do, and I was fortunate enough to get the job here at KHQ and SWX, and unfortunately it just didn't fit in the schedule of doing games on the radio anymore. So
all right, well, I think we can thank you for coming on for sure, and then I think we're definitely going to have to make this a reoccurring because there's a lot more we could have talked about. You should have saw Brian and I behind the scenes on the outline, deleting things to make time. So we'll have to do some follow-ups. Cool. All right, Dennis. Well, thank you for coming on.
I'd love to come on anytime that works for you. We can come back.
Yep. All right.
Dennis, if you're going to do all the booking work for us, yeah, we'll take you.
Yeah. If you book yourself anytime. All right. See you, Dennis.
You guys know how to get hold of me.
Sounds good.
Yeah. See you, Dennis.
All right, Brian. Well, that was Dennis Patchin. I would say we say this after like almost every episode, but one of some of the best information we ever got from a single episode.
Yeah, dude, no question. And one of the good things about having a guy like Dennis on is, I mean, look, we have an outline, we prep, but he knows enough about Vandal sports. He doesn't need to prep. You just throw him a question. We didn't even get to touch stuff like how preposterous it is that in basketball, men and women don't play Boise State every single year. There's a lot of, and I mean, not that we'll transition to basketball in a second, but I mean, that's actually, particularly men's basketball, that's a whole different topic that I'd be I know he's the voice of the Vandals from football perspective, but if he's going to be announcing basketball games, we probably have to have him on to talk state of Vandal hoops sometime.
Right. And, a lot of our listeners we'll definitely have him back. I mean, he made a really good point, right? When he asked him, like, I know we talked about it. I don't know why we never pulled the trigger or anything, but I think you're 100% right. It was just, most of our listeners know. Basically, until COVID, we had Colton Clark on, which, basically, I guess Dennis is the equivalent of having a Colton Clark on. We just didn't pull that connection as much. But podcast is already running a little long. And as you covered, we still have to touch basketball, which I think leads into listeners don't fret. I think you guys are going to be pleasantly surprised with what we're going to tell you. Maybe not the results, though.
Yeah, and the big news from Tubbs the Club, guys, is we're just going to restructure how we're covering men's and women's basketball. We're of course going to still have weekly shows to the extent we can, especially once football starts. That's an effortless process to have that weekly show. Basketball, we're going to shift from a once weekly show to multiple 5 to 15 minute post game reactions that we record. So it's a bit more timely. So we're not waiting, 5 days after a game to give commentary. You guys can get the Vandal commentary you want essentially right when it happens. And as far as basketball goes, it's going to be a lot easier. For example, I'll show you exactly how that's going to work. It's just much easier to have a short discussion about like our men. We had one game last week. We lost at University of Utah 41-79. We're down 40-16 at halftime. Truly one of the worst Vandal performances I've absolutely ever seen. Like our kind of positive note is, Scott Blakeney led us with 13 points, but there isn't a ton for us to go over other than if we're doing a post game, we would talk about like we can talk about what the implications are. And right now, like this just doesn't look like a good basketball team. And I don't know. Look, we got to see what Kendall McHugh can do. But if Kendall McHugh is not all Big Sky, I don't know how much turnaround is in this Idaho team. But better news, our women just beat Seattle U in Moscow 105-96 in their second to last non-conference game. Circling back, our men 0-5 in 0-3 in non-conference, 0-2 in conference right now. Women get the 9-point win in Moscow, even though they trailed at the end of the first quarter by around 8. For the game, our women shot 10-26 from 3 and 50% from the field. Beyonce B led us with 33 points. Paris Ashley added 26. And Gina Markson, preseason All Big Sky, I expect her to be postseason All Big Sky too, scored 24 points and grabbed 7 rebounds. Our women close out non-conference play Wednesday. So if you're listening this Thursday, game already happened at University of Arizona. And then right around the new year, both the men and women resume conference season. Men at home against NAU, women on the road at NAU.
Yep, and that's basketball. And it'll be the goal is probably more after each game, so people know. So you're going to get enough time for Brian and Martin, and I think they'll be separate. We haven't really worked that stuff out. They're emotional takes, but also enough time that they've gotten some statistics there for you guys. We think this is going to work better. You don't really need 30 to 45 minutes on basketball. That being said, for bigger games, the season preview, maybe when we play Wazoo, if we ever play Boise State, when the men get rolling, maybe like Montana, Eastern, etc. Bigger games, we'll probably do another episodic type thing. But for the time being, we feel like most of the time people only need a quick 15-minute reactional update to how we played against NAU and how the women played against Sac State. So that's how we're going to do it. If you hate it, let us know. Obviously, people really like the old way. We'd find a way to go back. But the real news is just producer Jerry's prices were exorbitant to run that show, and I don't want to do it. So we had to cut costs, as it were. So that Patreon's – I'm just kidding. But, yeah, that's basketball. We've got a lot of cool stuff. We just had, like, our annual thing, so we got a lot of stuff in the works. We hope to have a lot of stuff to start breaking to you guys here shortly. But that's the end of this episode. The most important thing is this is not our last episode you're going to get before the new year. This is not the last episode you're even going to get this week. We have premiering at 6 p.m. Pacific time on Thursday, the 24th. So for some of you, if you're listening to this on audio tonight, if you're watching on YouTube in 2 days, we're going to have a live premiere of our interview with Scott Green, the president of the University of Idaho, that a lot of people requested. Maybe not quite as in-depth and like Vandal knowledge as Dennis Patchin just gave us, but so more university interminglings and, the future plan of the university and how we're going to continue this legacy of leading. That's all I've got, Brian. You got anything else before we send it to the best bands in all the land?
No, man, I'm fine to say it's go Vandals, and we're done.
All right. Time for them to play us out with the beer song. Go Vandals.
Go Vandals.